The Jets are on the board, 24-17 winners over the Tennessee Titans in Nashville on Sunday. It wasn't pretty, but at the end of the day, a win is a win. Aaron Rodgers' first win, full win, in 623 days. Thanks for joining us on the Four Downs version of Flight Plan. I'm Tim McMaster, along with Zack Rosenblatt, the Jets reporter at The Athletic. Zack, before we got into this game, we talked about it on last week's episode where you would want the Jets to come out against a team that doesn't have playoff expectations, with a dominant performance and look great and win by double digits. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, the Jets lose the game and where are we now? And then somewhere in the middle, there was like, get by with a victory. We didn't consider that a great option, but that's what we got from the Jets. So how do you feel about it now?
You know, in the moment, I did not feel great, but I slept on it and thought about like everything that played out. I don't feel great about the defense, certainly, but I think this is kind of going to be what it looks like for the Jets this season. I think there's some of these teams that we thought maybe would be easier that are not going to be as easy, like the Titans, like the Patriots this week. Even the Broncos, I think, can be scrappy. And I just think the Jets, because of their holes on defense, it's going to be ugly, but they're going to be able to be in every game because of Aaron Rodgers. And you and I were kind of talking. We'll get into the Rodgers when we get to second down, but not to spoil too much. But like that, at the end of the day, if they are within striking distance, they have the quarterback who can do it for them. He can keep everybody calm, and he's able to lead them. So you feel good about this because I think the offense is in really, really good shape. Like as good a shape as since I've covered this team, certainly, and even longer than that. Defense has some issues, but they still do have talent on the back end at the very least. So I didn't come out of this thinking like Super Bowl contender necessarily, but I came out of this thinking like, okay, they can survive each week. And that's all you do in the NFL. You survive in advance, and as long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy, they can survive in advance and they can compete for a playoff spot. And that's, at the minimum, that's what you want out of this season is a playoff spot.
All right, let's get into four downs.
First down.
First down is the offense and Aaron Rodgers' game-winning drive in the fourth quarter, tied at 17. He drives them down the field. It's something a lot of people talked about, a lot of the players talked about after the fact that there was like a calming influence. They knew what they were doing. So let's get into the offense, and we'll start with that. They have a Hall of Fame quarterback who can take the ball in the fourth quarter in a tie game, and there's confidence, not just with the team, but I felt it watching at home that, you know what? I think they're going to go down and get points here. Yeah. I thought it might end up being a field goal to take the lead, but better than that, they go down the field, they get a touchdown in the fourth quarter when they needed it to win this football game.
Yeah, it's interesting. At the beginning of the game, I think everybody that was watching the game, Jets fans wise and reporters and all that, like did not probably feel great about how the offense was looking. It looked a little bit like it did last year. Nathaniel Hackett calling the plays and Zach Wilson playing quarterback, where they're being very conservative, running it, only short passes, not willing to take shots down the field. It looked like Aaron was a little hesitant. There was one play I think of in particular that Garrett was wide open down the sideline. There was a couple times Aaron held onto the ball too long, which, his strength is when he gets rid of the ball quickly. But and that gets into like when he started getting into a groove, it's when he was getting rid of the ball immediately after the snap, getting rid of it. I think the offensive line was pretty good. I posted some numbers on Twitter about that. All five of their offensive linemen were ranked in like the top 15 at their position, which is unreal for what this team has had. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers, you go into later in that game, he starts dealing. They had the first three drives, I think they had 15 total yards. Then they go on to the scoring drive that ended with Braelon Allen scoring on a touchdown. He's building chemistry with some of these players. They have pretty good weapons around him. The receivers outside of Garrett Wilson needed to be a little more consistent, but Mike Williams showed some flashes. We're going to get into the running backs later, but Aaron Rodgers looked like Aaron Rodgers at times. He made some ridiculous throws, especially on that game-winning scoring drive where he had a throw to Garrett Wilson and he had a throw to Mike Williams that were just stellar. And it just kind of goes into, last year you have Zach Wilson doing these things, and no disrespect to Zach, but like you would go into the end of the game thinking like, I don't know that they're going to be able to move the way down the field. Sometimes they did. Other times you're like, are they going to turn the ball over? It's like how I'm sure Titans fans felt about Will Levis, who frankly lost them that game on the other side of the ball. But, Aaron Rodgers even alluded to this. Like he's you and I talked about this before the game. He's so good post game. Like he just gives insight and anecdotes that like nobody else in the league does it like he does. I don't think so. But he said basically like because he was there last year on the sideline most of the year, and he said there was times where it felt like it was just like a defeatist attitude that they had in the huddle. It was like, oh man, we're gonna lose. We're not gonna be able to do this. Where he's making sure that is not the case. He does whatever he has to do, whether it's crack jokes, do nothing, yell at somebody. Like he kind of just has a feel for his teammates, and that's why when they go into the last drive, as Breece Hall said, like the moment didn't feel too big, and that's the biggest thing. You don't want to approach a drive where the game is on the line and think, okay, the game's on the line, we need to do this drive. You just need to approach it like any other drive. And I think having Aaron Rodgers, 40 years old, 20 years in the league, with the ability that he has, it makes a huge difference. And that's why, in the beginning part of the segment, that's why I feel a little bit better about the Jets coming forward than maybe I thought I would in the middle of that game where it felt like they were going to lose, frankly. Because you have Aaron Rodgers, you have the guy who's able to get everybody to calm down, including the coaching staff. Aaron wasn't perfect, as we said. In particular, the biggest issue I had was the way they were going right up to the game clock. I know fans are frustrated by that. Aaron admitted he needed to be better. It led to some good things because they had to call a timeout once, and then it led to a Breece Hall touchdown, which we'll get into. But so there's definitely some things they need to clean up. But I came out of that feeling very, very encouraged about the offense at the very least.
Second down.
I'm going to switch the order here because you just teased it. Let's get into the running backs. That was going to be third down. We're going to make it second down. Breece Hall, Braelon Allen. This is what the Jets have wanted. The stud running back and then the change-up guy that does things a little bit differently to play behind him. And at times on Sunday, both of them in the backfield together, which proved to be something that I think we may see more of going forward considering how to play it out. But they each score. They each get in they accounted for all the touchdowns, right? I mean, they did it through the passing game. They did it through the running game. Neither of them had 100 yards rushing or anything like that. But throughout the game, I couldn't help but thinking their performance and what they were delivering to the Jets was actually way more than was showing up on the stat sheet. When they needed a big play, they were getting it from these two running backs. Braelon Allen, the youngest player in the NFL. But I want to go back to what you were talking about Aaron Rodgers and everything he shares after the game, because one thing he talked about was the fact that he went to Nathaniel Hackett this week and said, hey, I think there's some areas to use these guys together. And man, did that pay off.
Yeah. The two running back formation, it's not used very often around the NFL unless you have like two legit running backs, one who's a good pass catcher at the very least and another good runner. And, it was funny because Rodgers was like, I told Hackett we should do that this week. He's like, I don't know if that's this week. And then Rodgers explained he wanted, and it was like the bubble screen play where he fakes it to Breece, and then Braelon's on the other side and kind of right in front of him, tosses it to him. Braelon burst up for a touchdown, and he pointed to Hackett at the sideline and kind of like to be like, see, which is kind of just a funny anecdote. But I kind of feel
plays into
vindicated
the
about
ongoing narrative about Hackett too, though.
Yeah. I will say Hackett is calling the plays. Like I know people like Aaron's calling everything. He absolutely is calling the plays. I think Aaron has the ability to change whatever he wants, and he does sometimes. But it is more of a collaboration than I think people think. And that anecdote doesn't help that narrative, obviously. But I was going to say I feel vindicated about Braelon Allen, though, because so often in training camp, you see a guy just like have a great camp, and you buy into it, and the season comes, and he doesn't do anything. Braelon Allen looked like a stud all of camp. He was one of the breakout stars of training camp. And he looked like what we saw throughout camp Sunday. And he brings like just a different element. He's much better in the passing game than anybody expected. He's a better in pass protection than Breece, who struggled a little bit in that area. And they just complement each other so well. And you started to see this offense open up once Braelon started getting in the mix. And once they started doing those two running back sets, they did it, I think, 4 times. They had a touchdown and a long first down on those plays. Breece, started off kind of slow running the ball, and then he had an amazing touchdown catch, which I alluded to earlier, where Aaron Rodgers was letting the play clock wind down in the third quarter. They had to call timeout. They go to the sideline. Breece comes up to him. He's like, if they have a linebacker on me, throw me the ball. And so he went on a go route. Rodgers saw him lined up with the linebacker. He threw it to him. It was a good throw, but he went up and I legit watching the game, I thought it was Garrett Wilson because he went up there just like a wide receiver.
And
And
Rodgers
so when
actually
you have,
downplayed the throw, saying it wasn't a very
yeah, he
good
did.
throw. But
Yeah,
it was a
yeah.
pretty good throw.
It was a
decent.
pretty good throw. But yeah, like they call each other, they call themselves the Killer Bees, is what Breece called it in the offseason. And it's a legit thunder and lightning type situation. And Braelon, I just think he has the absolute ability to be like an absolute stud at running back, and they have him as their second. Like I've alluded to many, many times, he's what they thought they were getting with Dalvin Cook, but they have him at 20 years old. He's already ready to go. Breece Hall is only 22. Like, this is the potential to be the best running back room in the NFL, just with those two guys. And if Breece, for whatever reason, needed to miss any time or plays, you have Braelon Allen there to fill in. And I think he earned a bigger role the rest of the season, whether it's just spelling Breece or they do a full legit two-headed monster to keep Breece healthy for the home stretch. Like, you need to get Braelon on the field, because right now I would argue he's their third best weapon on offense, because we haven't seen anything. Tyler Conklin has not been involved. That's a topic for another day. Maybe later in the week we'll talk about that. Allen Lazard has had some flashes, but he didn't look amazing, I thought, yesterday. Mike Williams is starting to get back in the mix, but you still need him to build up into what you were paying him to be. Braelon Allen has looked like their third best offensive player behind Garrett and Breece Hall, so he's going to be a part of this offense going forward.
Yeah, they're almost in a. It makes me think of like the Browns a couple of years ago with the two running backs, and honestly, if you were a fantasy owner,
Chubb and
you were
Kareem Hunt, yeah.
Yeah, and they were both capable of being the star. And if you were a fantasy owner, you selfishly like wanted one of them to get dinged up a little bit if you had the other guy, just to get more of the carries. But it is that situation where no matter who's in there, it's electric, and it's going to be fun to see how it continues to develop, because we're 2 games in to Braelon Allen's career. All right.
Third down.
All right, we've been all positive to this point, but it's one of those wins that did come with a dark cloud over it. Not quite the dark cloud that we had a year ago on Monday Night Football with Aaron Rodgers getting injured, but Zack, the Achilles, strikes again. This time, not confirmed yet as we record this, no results from the MRI, but all indications are that Jermaine Johnson suffered a torn Achilles, that he's going to be out for the rest of the year. C.J. Mosley also injured earlier in the game, banging up his toe. He'll be back, maybe for Thursday. We'll see. It's a short week, obviously, with the Patriots game coming up on Thursday. But this is a team that was already thinner than they've been on the pass rush, and suddenly the guy who he'd become the leader of that group in a lot of ways, the Pro Bowl last year with Huff leaving and JFM, and now Jermaine Johnson is not going to be with this team, and it brings up all kinds of questions. A lot of the answers to those questions are probably Hassan Reddick, but we'll get into that as well. But first, the initial impact of Jermaine Johnson. He was in tears. He spoke after the game, though.
I should say, pretty much as you were saying that, or like 5 minutes before Jermaine posted on social media that he tore his Achilles. So
okay,
we can like officially say that. The difference, the biggest, other than the fact that it's not the quarterback and all that stuff, the biggest difference between the Jermaine and Aaron Rodgers is that you hypothetically have the solution on your roster. He just has not reported to the organization yet. So, let's first start with the Jermaine side of things. Like it just really sucks for him. He became, I think some fans were questioning what he was going to be after that first year where he didn't play much, and he showed some flashes, but he goes into the second year, he completely re-energizes himself and changes his body, transforms himself into like a dominant player. And he was a Pro Bowler last year. And I know you can say it was just as an alternate, which, there's been some weird ones, but he had a very, very good year. And a big reason why their defense was able to do what it did was because of how good he was opposite Bryce Huff and JFM. So it's a huge loss. He became a leader for this team. I think about last week where he had a bad game against the 49ers, and then a couple days later he stands in front of his teammates and apologized for not, playing up to his capabilities. And he's always been a go-to guy for us media-wise. After the game, it's very, very rare that a guy suffers a season-ending injury and then speaks to the media shortly after that. Like, that just doesn't happen. And he not only spoke to us, but he was in really good spirits. He has a great mindset about everything. And he'll come back. I'm confident he'll come back fine. It's a hard injury to come back from, but I think he'll be okay. But yeah, defensive end group was already perilously thin. You had Jermaine Johnson on one side. You're like, okay, we feel good about at least one of our starters. At the other side, you had Michael Clemens, Will McDonald. Will McDonald had the best game of his career, short career, but he had the best game of his career. 3 sacks, One of them, he kind of got lucky on. Will Levis tripped over him. He wasn't in the right place. Like, you give him credit for that. But Will Levis tripped over him. And the last one was the most impressive one, the third sack. Third down, fourth quarter. They needed it. The Titans are threatening. It feels like they're going to score. Will McDonald wins with power, as Robert Saleh keeps emphasizing. They've needed him to win with power. He won with power, got the sack that clinched the game. He said after the game, like, all I was thinking is if I win this one-on-one, we win the game, and that's what happened. And so you're very encouraged by that, but he has not been a full-time player. He has not been a guy that the other teams have had to prepare for every week. So now your starters are Michael Clemens and Will McDonald. If you had said that before the season, I think everybody would have been freaking out, and understandably. Now, the Jets love a rotation at defensive end. It's a big reason why their defensive line is the way they is, because they shuffle in guys who are pass rush specialists on third down. They have the run stoppers at the beginning, and it just has worked amazingly. And that's a big reason why this defense is what it is, because the defensive line, they do not blitz in this defense. It's very rare that they blitz. That's Jeff Ulbricht's whole thing. You need the guys up front to win their matchups, and they mostly have the last couple of years. If your guys are Michael Clemens, Will McDonald, and then the backups are Tack McKinley, Brady McGregor, and Eric Watts, you do not feel as good about that rotation. And, maybe these guys will emerge. Maybe Tack McKinley will look like the first-round pick he was drafted to be. Will McDonald will look like this every week. Clemens will be a good run stopper. But it's just a really big unknown, and I don't think any offensive coordinator is shaking in their boots looking at those defensive ends. So, Reddick, the Jets have been pretty dug in on their stance that we're not going to negotiate until he shows up. Reddick's been pretty dug in a stance that, F you, I'm not coming anywhere until you give me my money. And it's reached the point now that the Jets, if they want to be a legit playoff contender, they need Hassan Reddick, or you need to find somebody else, whether that's in a trade or in free agency. There's some veterans like Justin Houston, like nobody that's going to change the course of their season, but maybe they can help. Carl Lawson's on the practice squad in Dallas if you wanted to try and rekindle that flame. I'm concerned. The pass rush, the defense started off really poorly, and they got better as the game went on, especially as Will started getting some pressure. But I have real concerns about this defensive end group without Jermaine a part of it. And injury luck has become something. It was something all offseason we mentioned how nobody has the amount of injury luck they had those first 2 years. Nobody was getting hurt. Like, nobody, like, truly important to the, Al Woods got hurt and Chuck Clark, but you survived those injuries.
Yeah, really, since Mosley had the big injury, obviously, when he first came over, and then Lawson also. But other than those, which were at this point, 4 years ago, they've been remarkably healthy. But that DJ Reed missed the game too.
Yep, DJ Reed missed the game. Michael Carter II is going to deal with an ankle injury all year. And then you have C.J. Mosley left with a toe injury, which if it's turf toe, which it might be, that is something that can linger, and he already was losing some athleticism, so I'm very concerned about that. Jamie Sherwood looked really good, and that's very encouraging. So if he can be like that every week, you feel a little better. Missing CJ is more about the football, though, than about the football, because he's the captain of that defense. He's the Aaron Rodgers of that defense. You lose Jermaine, you lose CJ. I would guess he doesn't play on Thursday, short week. Michael Carter II banged up. DJ Reed, I'm not 100% sure if he's going to be ready to go on Thursday. Like, that's an issue, and you're really testing your depth right now. Brandon Echols looked pretty good at corner, too. The defense did not look good at the beginning of the game again, though. This was a lot different conversation if Will Levis doesn't, as he's tripping over Will McDonald, try and toss the ball to his teammate, as he did the week before. Just like a baffling, dumb play by a quarterback. Brian Callahan didn't even hold back. He was like, that was dumb, and he cost us points. The Titans would have went up 14-0 if they scored a touchdown on that drive. And the Jets being down 14, we don't know if they can come back from those large, even with Rodgers. It would have been demoralizing, and instead that happened. He threw it into double coverage later. But otherwise, he was running and kind of doing what he wanted, running the ball. He had that ridiculous throw just in front of Sauce Gardner. But I'm concerned about the defense, especially up front. The Jets can stay in every game as long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy, but I am very concerned about the defense and their defensive ends getting off blocks and things like that going forward.
Fourth down.
That being said, we're going to finish it on a positive defensive note, and that is that they stepped up when they needed to in the final minute of the game. We kind of already covered a little bit of this, but they get the defensive stand down on the goal line with the game in the balance in the final minute, and who knows if they had scored a touchdown. If they go for two, the game could have completely swung. We talked about the Will McDonald sack in that series, but overall, when they get down there inside the red zone, this Jets defense came through when it needed to, which is something that if I'm remembering back to last year, early in the season,
Yeah.
before they really hit their stride, there was a few of those games where they kind of bend but don't break, and they got the big moment when they needed to before they kind of became more of a dominant unit.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely stepped up as the game went on. Like they forced those turnovers that which were crucial. If you want to lump in special teams to the defense, Irv Charles had a blocked punt. You'd have liked to turn
Which
that
we
into a
actually
touchdown.
we talked about that possibility last week too.
Yeah.
Coming off of last week.
Yeah,
It's
you're right. Yeah.
so weird though. Like for one unit to have 2 block punts in 2
Crazy.
games to start a year, that's rough.
That's rough. I don't know who their special teams coordinator is, but that is not what you want to see. But yeah, Irv Charles looks like a star. He looks like they replaced Justin Hardy without issue. You would, like I said, you would have liked to score a touchdown off that. They got the ball at the 30 and only settled for a field goal. But yeah, the defense got better as they went along. Javon Kinlaw had a much better game, especially in the run game, I should say. The Titans didn't really run the ball that effectively outside of Levis. In the beginning, they did. Tony Pollard looked pretty good. After that, they kind of buckled down. Honestly, once C.J. Mosley went out and Sherwood came in and played really well, the defense really started to step up. Chuck Clark had two bad penalties, unnecessary roughness, and it seems like he's kind of that kind of player who's very aggressive, so he's going to get those penalties. I thought on the Sauce Gardner play that I alluded to, where Calvin Ridley caught it for 40-yard touchdown, looked like an impossible play. Like in the moment, it looked like to me that Chuck Clark intercepted it just because like the angle of it, I couldn't see the football. And then you look and all of a sudden he scored a touchdown. I'm like, wait, what? So there's definitely some stuff to clean up. I think Jeff Ulbrich is a great coach. I think Aaron Whitecotton's a great developer in the front. I feel good about their coaching staff. I'm concerned about the personnel up front, like I said, but there was encouraging signs, but you need them to start better. Like once you start playing against really good teams, like the 49ers, they won't for a few weeks. The Vikings look like the next really good team they're going to play against, by the way. They look way better than I think people expected.
Nick Bosa was right. Bosa was right. The Vikings were tough.
Hey, I've been high on the Vikings since the preseason. It was all about Darnold, and he's looked good.
Sam Darnold. He looked real good.
He did. And by the way, and I'll say this, anytime a guy who used to be on the Jets does well somewhere else, it's like everybody who doesn't follow the Jets decides that's a good time to like shit on the Jets. Sam Darnold hasn't been good his entire NFL career. Like I think he's always had talent. He had a good start to the Panthers and then fell off a cliff. Didn't play at all with the 49ers. Like not everything is indicative of the Jets' problems. And also Adam Gase, everybody knows Adam Gase was a disaster. Like it's kind of cliche to even bring it up at this point. So it's kind of annoying with that stuff. But yeah, the defense, it needs to be better for 4 quarters. This doesn't look like a top 10 defense like it has the last few years, but if they can be top 15 and the offense is also top 15, that's a playoff team. They were a top 5 defense and a bottom 5 offense the last 2 years, and so they won 7 games each year. If the ratio is more towards the middle, this is going to be a playoff team. So you need them to play better. Some things that were encouraging, some things that are concerning, but it's going to be very interesting to see how they look on a short week with all these injuries this week. Like I'm very curious to see how they look on Thursday.
Yep, they do need to clean up the penalties overall. First half, 6 penalties, 65 yards yesterday, and there was some dumb ones that kept drives going and shit their own drive in the foot. But those are things that hopefully they clean up as well. All right, this has been good. I love this format, the 4 downs. We're bringing you the 4 big themes from each game as the recap. We'll have the longer episode later in the week to get you ready for the Patriots coming up on Thursday. Shout out to everybody out there that is subscribed on YouTube. We crossed the 1,000 subscriber barrier, on our way to 2,000. So keep those subscribers coming. Tell everybody that we're still around. We're not the old podcast, but we are still around. So tune in, subscribe, wherever you find us. And we are still trying to get the messaging out of how to get the audio that, as we promised, it is free to get the audio, and you can listen to it on Spotify and Apple. There is a step in the middle, and we'll continue. We're going to get a video up on the YouTube page to kind of explain.
If you can't figure it out, tweet at us or tweet at Joe.
Joe's all about figuring this out too. So definitely, he will. He may send you a personal email.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. It's just there's a couple steps you have to take in order to do it. But once you do it, you're good, and it's in your feed. I have it on my Apple Podcast feed and Spotify. No issues.
Yeah. So it's just a one-time thing. It's not like every time you have to figure it out. So if you need help with that, shoot us a message in the comments section, and we will definitely follow up with you to make sure that you have the audio. But we love you checking out the video as well. Thanks to everybody for tuning in to another episode of The Flight Plan.